How to create an attention-grabbing professional steam capsule in less than 20 minutes. Hey, how's it going? My name is Darius. And if you're worried that your game, will fail because your Steam capsule art looks bad and won't attract players to click your Steam store page, then here's 3 simple steps you can do right now to make your Steam capsule look professional. And what you'll learn is that you don't need a degree in graphic design, and you don't need to hire a professional marketing artist, and you don't need to spend, weeks or months on working on a capsule art that will grab attention. In fact, what you'll learn in this article, in this video, will only take you 20 minutes to do. So if you want a professional looking Steam capsule that grabs attention, then here's what you need to know, and here's exactly what to do. So the reason I'm writing this article or doing this video is because I'm helping a small game dev right now with their indie game with some marketing consultation. And the dev is worried that because their capsule art is low quality, players won't bother clicking on their Steam page in the first place, right? So I'm going to use their capsule art as an example, and I'm going to kind of take off the kids' gloves and be a bit critical. My intent here is to point out how we can all improve our marketing efforts and make an attention-grabbing Steam capsule. So saying that, let's look at a amateur versus a professional Steam capsule and see what's the difference. And then once you know the difference, you can, use the same techniques for your own Steam capsule art. So why does the first Steam capsule art look messy? It's all over the place and amateur, while the other, on the right, looks tight and professional. So let's go into depth on what's really going on, because once you understand these simple design rules, you'll know how to create your own professional looking capsule art in less than 20 minutes. So let's get into simple design rules any game dev can use to make their Steam capsule art more attention grabbing. So once you understand the rules, I'll show you then a step-by-step on how you can apply the same rules to help you make, a professional capsule art. And my goal is to show you how to do this all in 20 minutes. So here's what you need to know. So here's design rule number 1, and that is good design doesn't call attention onto itself. So the goal of good design is instant visual understanding. So let me explain what I mean. Good visual design is just like, good sound design. Good sound design is, invisible. You can't hear it. The only time you hear, sound design is when it's, bad. So it's the same with good visual design. You'll never notice good visual design because it's not there to show off itself, right? Good design is there to show off the content it's displaying. It's there to amplify the core message, right? So good design amplifies the core message, and good design lets you instantly understand what's going on visually, right? So when you look at, the first example, the Keep Flips capsule, you'll notice the bad design right away. And this takes away from the message the capsule is trying to convey, right? But with the second, example with Getting Over It capsule art, you hardly notice any design, and the good design is invisible. And you instantly understand what's going on, even though you might not be consciously aware of everything that's going on. So my point here is when you compare these two, it's really obvious and you can notice bad design, while the other, professional, you can hardly notice what's going on at all, right? But you kind of have a sense that it's professional. And in a moment, I'll show you that there's a lot going on with the Getting Over It capsule art design. And later, you'll learn how you can apply the same techniques to your own capsule art. But for now, let's keep going and let's learn more about good design versus bad design. So design rule number 2 is good design is simple to make things easy to understand. So good design is not complex. There's not a lot of elements stacked up onto each other. In fact, there's very few elements. So this is exactly what Getting Over It accomplishes. It's simple design and has very few elements, and a person instantly understands what they're looking at, right? And you got to remember that Steam capsules are really small, right? And a person will glance at it maybe for a few seconds. And if you use a complex design, you'll confuse people, right? And confusion doesn't grab attention, especially when you only have like maybe 1 second to grab their attention. So what grabs attention is a simple design with very few elements where a person instantly understands what's going on. Okay, let's keep going, and all of this will make sense. I'm kind of be talking abstract things, but I'll show you concrete examples soon. So here's design rule number 3, and that is start with a dominant visual element. So your eye will be always pulled toward the biggest or brightest visual element. Then it'll move to the next biggest visual element. This is what's called a visual hierarchy. So the visual hierarchy goes, the biggest element, or the brightest, the second biggest element, then the smallest element, right? So in Getting Over It, the dominant visual element is the bright logo on the top left. Then your eye moves on to the right to the, the rock or the mountain area. Then your eye moves back to the left to the, the bottom to the small little dude, right? Almost in the center. So There's a big, middle, and small element for your eye to follow. And your eye likes to follow, this kind of rhythm because that's the main job of an eye, is to explore its environment, right? Your eye is constantly scanning, like this, looking around like that, right? So this is important because if you don't have a visual hierarchy, then your eye gets stuck and it doesn't know where to go next. So in my keep flip example, the dominant visual element is the logo, but then there's no other visual element, right? There is no hierarchy. There's nowhere else the eye, wants to follow, and your eye wants to follow, right? If there's no flow, then it's confusing where the eye should go next. And with getting over it, your eye has, a flow to follow, right? And remember, your steam capsule only has a few seconds to grab attention. If there's any small amount of confusion, then you've lost their interest. So this brings me to the next rule, and that is design rule number 4, and that is follow reading gravity. So I just talked about visual hierarchy where, you have a big element, a middle element, and a small element your eye can follow, right? But what else is important is the order of those elements. So let me explain. If you notice in getting over it, the biggest or brightest dominant visual element is in the top left. Then your eye follows to the right, to the mountain, and then to the player, the bottom left, right? So in the Western world, we are trained to read from, top left to right and top to bottom, right? And this is important because the eye naturally wants to start at the top left because that's what we've been, since we're a kid, we've been trained to start at the top left. But here's the thing. If we go against reading gravity, then it just confuses the player. And that's why I said order is important. If you have a big dominant visual element, then stick it to the top left, right? Because that's where the eye wants to go and naturally start, right? Or, at least in the Western world, right? So in keep flip example, there is no reading gravity. All the visual elements are basically centered. They're just smack dab in the middle, right? And this isn't interesting because the eye has nowhere to explore. And like I said, our eye is evolved to scan our environment. So in the amateur, capsule art, it breaks reading gravity. And in the professional capsule art and getting over it, your eye starts at the top left where your eye naturally wants to go because that's how we read, again, like in the Western world, right? So here's design rule number 5, and that is contrast. So in getting over it, you'll notice that the background is darker than the foreground and the logo is white compared to the overall picture. This contrast helps, instant visual understanding. But with keep flip, you'll notice the logo is bright, and that's a good, starting point, but the contrast isn't there. With the logo having, this gradient, and then the background is almost, just as the same color or the same, tone. When you don't have any contrast, it's hard for the eye to understand what this should be looking at, right? And again, this adds confusion. And if your player is confused about what they're looking at, then their attention is gone. Because remember, we only have less than 1 second to grab their attention. All right, let's move on to rule number 6, and that is design and spacing. So you'll notice that getting over it uses spacing perfectly. What I mean is the logo is aligned to the top left, the mountain is aligned in the right, and the character is not really centered and it's a little to the left. So the logo and the character on the left sort of balances itself with the big mountain on the right. There's a weird symmetry, right? So there's like a balance going on there. However, most amateurs, what they'll do is align things centered. And at first, this makes sense, right? If you want something to stand out and you want people to look at it first, then you put it right in the center, right? Right dead in the center. That makes sense, right? But good design is more than just centering things, right? It also incorporates spacing, alignment, reading gravity, dominant visual elements, and the hierarchy and simplicity, right? So when we center elements like this, there is no space, and adding space to your capsule design makes it look more professional. So remember, the goal of design is to show off the message and create instant visual understanding. When we just center things or just, plop elements wherever we feel like it, then it breaks down that visual understanding. All right, let's keep going to design rule number 7, and that is the rule of thirds. So another element I want you to notice with getting over it, this example, is that there are 3 things in front of you. So there's the logo, the character, and the mountain, right? And each element is placed in a grid that follows, the rule of thirds. And I think the reason we find the rule of thirds so pleasing to the eye is because, of this rhythm, right? You start with the top left with the logo, then move to the mountain, and then to the character in the bottom, right? Then back to the logo. There's a rhythm, balance, and symmetry. Your eye, is basically exploring. And again, the purpose of an eye is to survey an area and take in information, right? It wants to scan and not just look at something totally centered, right? But if we just center all the elements, we lose that balance and symmetry and rhythm, and there is nothing for the eye to explore, right? It's hard for the eye to separate all these elements and it makes it hard to understand what's going on, right? And again, you only have 1 second to grab attention, and if there's any sort of confusion and the player has to think, then you lost their attention, right? But you might be thinking rules are meant to be broken, right? And it's true. Great artists break these rules all the time, and they figure out a way, to still grab attention, even, not following all of these rules, right? And there are a lot of steamed capsule art designs that, don't follow these rules, but those designs are made by well-paid artists, and these artists have years of experience behind them, and they can create, designs that look pleasing to the eye and not follow these rules, right? But for now, if you don't have the time or money, to become a professional artist, or you can't hire a professional artist, then these rules you just learned will give you something that is at least, 3 times or 4 times better than your old capsule art design, right? All right, now that you've learned all these 7 rules, let's take everything you've learned and apply it to your own capsule art. So how do you create a capsule art that is attention grabbing, professional looking, and takes you less than 20 minutes to make? So let's do that next. So I call this the STEAM Capsule Formula. It's a 3-step guide on how to make your capsule design grab attention and look more professional. And this formula is created specifically for game devs that have no art experience or design experience and want something that looks professional, without spending more than 20 minutes on it. So that's what you're about to learn next: how to create a professional STEAM capsule in under 20 minutes. So before you start this guide, you'll need 3 resources. So you'll need a graphic editor like Photoshop, GIMP, Affinity Designer or Affinity Photo, or Inkscape. Also, you'll need to know the dimensions of all your marketing assets. So in the description below, I have a link for the Steamworks graphical asset documentation. Okay, once you got those 2 resources, I think I said 3, but anyway, there's 2 resources you need. Once you have those, let's move on to the actual step-by-step guide. All right, you ready? So let's take everything you've learned and apply it to your own Steam capsule art design. So here's step 1, and that is grab these 4 assets from your game. So art asset number 1 is your main characters or your main vehicle of your game. And then art asset number 2 is grab a background image of your game's environment. This could be simply a screenshot. Okay, art asset number 3 is a weapon or a unique item from your game, or even a sidekick character, right? And then art asset number 4 is your game logo. So here I got my main character, I got my background, a unique side character, and a logo. Okay, once you got your art assets, let's move on to step number 2, and that is open a digital image in your graphics editor. So you'll need a 460 pixel by 250 pixel image. That's 300 dpi. So go open up a new file and make sure you use these dimensions, right? And the reason you're using 460 pixel by 250 pixel is because that is the size of a header capsule art according to Steam's graphical documentation. Also, using 300 dpi or ppi is better than using 72 dpi when editing digital images. So once you got that open, here's what to do next. So here's step number 3, and arrange your art assets by following the design rules you just learned. So 1, paste your background so it covers the entire image. Also, if your background is a little too bright, darken it a bit. The reason is you want your background elements to be darker than your foreground elements. So 2, grab your logo and align it top left. Make sure your logo is white. If you have a logo that is in color, make sure that it won't blend with the background too much. This is why I had you darken your background a bit so that your foreground elements pop out more. Then 3, align your main character or your main vehicle on the right side and make sure this element is big and it doesn't blend with the background. And again, make sure it's pretty big and it dominates the right side, because you're building a little bit of balance here right now. Okay, number 4 is now you need to balance the big element on the right side with the logo on the left. So to do this, you add your side character or your unique item and make it smaller than the logo and the main character or vehicle, right? And in my example, I decided to put the dog or my sidekick with my main character on the right, because I felt there was enough balance between the logo and the character on the right. And that's because my background image has a little shadowy figure on the left side that adds symmetry to the whole thing, right? So that's my example, but here's some more examples that I found on Steam that follow this formula. You see what I mean? That good design is invisible. At first glance, you don't notice much is going on, right? Especially with, for example, the getting over it capsule art. It's not fancy, it's not complicated, but if you look closely, there was a lot of thought put into this design, right? When you look at these other examples, you'll notice that the logo is aligned on the top left, and the right will have a large visual element. Also, once you get used to this formula, then you can play around with it and break the rules a little bit. So for example, you can flip the formula around where you have the logo on the right and the character on the left. Okay, here's your action step right now. So here's a dumb question. Is it possible to know how to ride a bike by just, reading about it or watching somebody ride a bike in a video, right? No, you can't, right? You got to get on the seat. You got to do it IRL in real life. And that's the only way you learn something when you experience it, right? So that's why it's important to do this step right now. You've learned a lot, but all of it will go to waste if you don't put it into action. So do this right now. It only will take you 20 minutes. So grab your 3 or 4 art assets, your logo, your background, your main character vehicle, and your secondary, your sidekick character or a unique item, right? Then go open a graphics editor and open a new file with the following dimensions at 460px at 250 pixels, right? At 300 dpi or ppi, right? So now place your background and cover the entire image. On the top left, align your logo, and on the right, add your main character and make it big. Then take your secondary character and play around and see where it fits best, right? So you want that balance, right? Because the left and right, you want that balance. So do this right now because you'll see that you don't need to hire an expensive artist or designer to make an attention-grabbing steam capsule. All you need to do is follow some design rules and your capsule art will look more professional. But if you're still stuck and you want me to have a look at your Steam capsule art and give you some free pointers, then here's what to do. In the description below, there's a link to my free workshop. Click that and I'll help you with your Steam capsule art. All right, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Again, my name is Darius and good luck with your game dev. I hope my graphic design tips will help you make a capsule art that is attention grabbing and looks more professional and gets more people to visit your Steam page and wishlist your game and then have a successful launch when you do launch. All right, later.